Hi, welcome back to the Mountain Takes. I'm Isaac. Here's what most climbers miss. Mountains follow patterns. Not random patterns, predictable ones. The same mistakes repeated across different climbers, different mountains, different years. The same warnings ignored. The same decisions that lead to death. Today we're examining the pattern that nobody seems to learn from. And then we're asking the question that matters. Why do we keep making the same choices that kill us?
It was May 16, 2019, at Camp 4 on Everest at 26,000 feet. Victoria Ashford, 44, a venture capitalist from New York, had paid $110,000 for this expedition. Her guide was Pemba Sherpa, 38, with 16 years of high-altitude experience and 9 Everest summits. Victoria believed money entitled her to make all decisions. Pemba understood money bought her an experienced guide, nothing more. By Camp 2, Victoria wanted to climb faster than safe protocols allowed. She wanted to skip acclimatization days. Pemba had documented every recommendation to slow down. Victoria had rejected every one. By Camp 3, her oxygen saturation was 62%, dangerously low. Pemba recommended descending. Victoria said she had a board meeting in 2 weeks and would not turn back. At Camp 4, the weather forecast was marginal. Pemba recommended waiting another day for a better window. Victoria said they were going tonight. Pemba said the risk was too high. Victoria told him she was paying for guidance, not his fears. They left Camp 4 at 11:45 p.m. on May 16th. By 2 a.m., they were at 27,200 meters. The weather had changed. Wind was increasing. Clouds were moving in from the south. Pemba checked his satellite forecast. The window had collapsed. A storm was moving in faster than predicted. He told Victoria they needed to descend immediately. Victoria said they were too close to summit. Pemba said the summit was 1,800 meters above them. They couldn't reach it before the storm arrived. Victoria said she would summit even if she climbed alone. Do you understand what Pemba was facing? A client who understood the danger and chose to ignore it anyway. They reached 27,600 meters at 4:30 a.m. The storm had arrived early. Wind was gusting above 60 kilometers per hour. Visibility was less than 10 meters. Pemba's face was numb. Victoria's hands were frozen solid. Pemba told Victoria they were turning around. Victoria said she could see the summit. She was hallucinating. Pemba physically grabbed her harness and tried to turn her around. Victoria resisted. Pemba had to drag her downward by force. The descent from 27,600 meters in a whiteout with a client who was hallucinating was the most dangerous situation Pemba had faced. They moved slowly. The wind pushed them both toward exposed edges. At 6 a.m., Victoria collapsed. Pemba tried to help her up. She was unconscious. Pemba tried calling for help on his radio. Too much static. He realized if both of them stayed, both would die. He left Victoria at 27,400 meters at 6:45 a.m. on May 17th. Pemba descended to Camp 4 by 10:30 a.m. with severe frostbite on both hands and feet. A rescue attempt was organized, but by the time rescue climbers reached 27,000 meters, the storm had worsened. They found Victoria unconscious at 27,200 meters. She was already deceased. Pemba had begged her to descend 7 times. She had refused. Victoria died because she refused to listen to the one person whose entire job was keeping her alive. Pemba survived with frostbite damage, but never guided again. It was April 28, 2024, Everest's Khumbu Icefall, 19,800 feet, temperature minus 12 degrees Fahrenheit, the seracs cracking somewhere in the dark like distant gunfire. Deborah Ashworth was 54 years old, a hedge fund executive from Greenwich, Connecticut, used to getting exactly what she paid for. She'd spent close to $200,000 on this expedition, and she reminded her guides of that number constantly, as if the price tag itself could rewrite the rules of altitude. Her flaw wasn't physical weakness. It was the unshakable belief that money could negotiate with a mountain that had never once cared about anyone's bank balance. The first warning sign came at Camp 1, when her guide, a Sherpa named Pemba Sherpa, told her the acclimatization schedule required 2 extra rest days before pushing higher. She refused outright, calling the delay unacceptable and demanding the itinerary be compressed to fit her travel plans. Pemba warned her that rushing the rotation would sharply increase her risk of altitude sickness. She told him she hadn't hired him for his opinions, only for his hands. Before we go further, I want you to sit with something. Somewhere on this mountain right now, someone is making the exact same mistake Deborah made, and they don't know it yet. If you've ever wondered whether wealth actually protects people from consequences, drop your answer in the comments, because what happens next might change your mind completely. And if stories like this keep you up thinking, subscribing costs nothing and helps more than you'd guess. The second warning sign appeared at Camp 2, 21,300 feet, when the expedition doctor recorded her oxygen saturation at 71%, dangerously low even for that elevation, and recommended a full day of rest. Deborah instead accused the doctor of exaggerating the numbers just to justify a slower, cheaper pace, and threatened a scathing public review of the entire outfitter. The third warning sign came at the yellow band below Camp 3, when a ladder crossing a crevasse had shifted overnight in the wind. Pemba asked for 20 minutes to re-anchor it safely before anyone crossed. Deborah screamed at him in front of the entire team, calling him incompetent and demanding he move faster. Witnesses later said her voice carried across the ice for nearly a full minute, and that even climbers from other expeditions stopped to stare. The inciting incident happened at 6:14 in the morning on May 16th, above the South Col, when Deborah refused her guide's direct order to turn back, despite a headache that had progressed into slurred, disjointed speech. She insisted the symptoms were simple exhaustion, not sickness, and pushed past the balcony at 27,600 feet without her supplemental oxygen flowing properly. Her regulator left loosened after an earlier argument over gear weight. Here's a question worth asking before this story finishes. How many warning signs does a person need before pride stops mattering more than survival? Everest has answered that question hundreds of times, and almost every answer ends the same way. Comment below with what you think finally breaks that kind of stubbornness, if anything ever does. And if you want to see exactly how this unravels, stay through the end, because the next 2 minutes explain everything. By 9:40 that morning, her coordination had deteriorated into a stumbling, uneven gait, and she began repeating the same sentence to her climbing partner, unaware she'd already said it twice before. Pemba recognized the pattern immediately, cerebral edema, and past the point where a slow descent alone could save her. He radioed for emergency oxygen and began an immediate descent, half carrying her across the fixed ropes while the wind tried to pull them both off balance. Deborah died at 11:52 that morning, near 27,200 feet, less than 200 meters from the tent, where a rescue team was already climbing toward her. Witnesses said her last coherent words were a complaint that no one had warned her the descent would be this cold. An investigation by the expedition company later concluded that a properly seated oxygen mask and a single additional rest day at Camp 2 would likely have prevented the swelling that killed her. Her family sued the outfitter for $6 million. The case was dismissed within 4 months, and the outfitter released her medical records to prove every warning had been documented in writing. But Deborah's mistake was believing money could buy her way past a mountain that doesn't take bribes.
It was May 18, 2024, at approximately 7:45 a.m. at Camp 4 on Mount Everest's south side. The altitude was 26,000 feet. The temperature was minus 38 degrees Celsius. A climber named Victoria Hartwell, age 52, was preparing for her summit push. Victoria was a successful real estate developer from San Francisco. She had paid $87,000 for her Everest expedition. She had hired a private guide. She had purchased premium supplemental oxygen. She had done everything that money could buy. What money could not buy was humility. Victoria Hartwell had arrived at Everest Base Camp on the 15th of April, 2024, already frustrated. She had expected a 5-star experience. Instead, she had found a basic tent community at 17,600 feet with no Wi-Fi, no hot showers, and food that she deemed unacceptable for the price. She had complained to the expedition operator repeatedly. She had demanded better accommodations. She had demanded that her guide prioritize her comfort over safety protocols. Her guide, a Sherpa named Tenzin with 19 years of experience, had attempted to explain that Everest Base Camp was a wilderness location, not a resort. Victoria had responded by threatening to leave a negative review on TripAdvisor. By the time Victoria reached Camp 2 at 6,500 meters, her behavior had already created friction within the expedition. She was slower than other climbers. She required more rest breaks. She complained about the cold, the food, the altitude, the physical demands. Tenzin was patient. He had worked with difficult clients before, but he was also experienced enough to recognize a pattern. Victoria believed that money entitled her to a different experience than other climbers. She believed that her resources should protect her from the normal rules of mountaineering. At Camp 3, Victoria experienced her first real symptom of altitude sickness. She had a headache and nausea. Tenzin suggested descending immediately. These were early warning signs of acute mountain sickness that could progress to cerebral edema at higher altitude. Victoria refused. She said she felt fine, that the headache was just dehydration, that she would feel better after more rest. Tenzin documented in his logbook that he had advised descent. Victoria refused. She said she had paid too much to turn back now. On May 18, Victoria and Tenzin left Camp 4 for the summit push. Victoria's oxygen saturation at Camp 4 was approximately 54%, critically low. Her breathing was labored. Her movements were slow. Tenzin suggested using supplemental oxygen immediately. Victoria said she would use it only if necessary. She had read online that using oxygen on Everest was cheating, that real climbers summited without it. Tenzin explained that he was not concerned with what online forums said. He was concerned with keeping her alive. Victoria told him that she was paying for his opinion, not for his fear. They began climbing. Within 2 hours, Victoria's condition was noticeably worse. Her coordination was declining. Her speech was becoming slightly slurry. Her judgment was visibly compromised. Tenzin began administering supplemental oxygen forcibly, overriding Victoria's preferences because he recognized that her brain was being destroyed by the altitude. By 11 a.m., Victoria was at approximately 27,500 feet and experiencing severe symptoms of high-altitude cerebral edema. Her brain was swelling. Her ability to make rational decisions had been replaced by confusion and obstinacy. At 11:47 a.m. on May 18, Victoria collapsed on the mountain at approximately 28,200 feet. Her oxygen saturation had dropped to 38%. Her body could no longer function. Tenzin attempted to support her, to keep her moving, to get her to lower altitude. But Victoria's weight, combined with her complete incapacity, made forward movement impossible. Tenzin called for assistance. Other guides and climbers nearby responded. They attempted to lower Victoria toward Camp 4. At 1:15 p.m. on May 18, at approximately 27,800 feet, Victoria Hartwell's respiratory system failed. She had been at extreme altitude for too long. Her brain had swelled beyond the point of recovery. Her lungs were filling with fluid from altitude-induced pulmonary edema. Her body simply stopped functioning. She died surrounded by guides who had done everything they could to keep her alive. Guides who had been ignored and overruled by a client who believed her money entitled her to ignore the laws of altitude. Tenzin descended alone. He was traumatized. In interviews afterward, he said, "I told her 5 times. 5 times I said we need to go down. She said she was paying for the summit, not for my fear. The mountain doesn't care about money. It only cares about oxygen." It was the 8th of July, 2023, at approximately 7,200 meters on K2's Bottleneck section in Pakistan. K2 is the second highest mountain on Earth at 8,611 meters. It is also the second deadliest. For every 4 climbers who summit K2, 1 dies. The Bottleneck is a narrow gully where massive seracs hang suspended above the route. Climbers must pass through it quickly, knowing that falling ice could kill them at any moment. On the 8th of July, 2023, a climber named Melissa Ramirez, age 46, was ascending through the Bottleneck with her guide. Melissa was a venture capitalist from Austin, Texas. She had summited Kilimanjaro and Denali. She believed that experience on lower mountains translated to experience on K2. She was categorically wrong. Melissa Ramirez had arrived at K2 Base Camp on the 20th of June, 2023, with an attitude that immediately created friction. She was wealthy, she was successful in business, she was accustomed to getting what she wanted through determination and resource allocation. She had paid $145,000 for her K2 expedition through a premium operator. She had hired a Sherpa guide named Dorji who had summited K2 6 times. Dorje was experienced, skilled, and respected in the climbing community. Melissa treated him like an employee who worked on commission, which meant she believed that his job was to get her to the summit, regardless of conditions or safety protocols. By Camp 3, at 7,400 meters, Melissa's behavior had already created problems. She was pushing ahead of the acclimatization schedule. She was ignoring Dorje's recommendations about rest days. She was insisting that they climb higher faster than safe protocols allowed. Dorje had documented in his logbook that he had recommended slowing the pace. Melissa had responded by questioning whether he actually wanted her to summit, implying that his caution was somehow a failure on his part. On the 8th of July, Melissa and Dorje began their push toward the summit. The weather was forecasted to hold for approximately 18 hours. Melissa was moving through the bottleneck at approximately 7,200 meters when her oxygen saturation was measured at 46%, critically low. Dorje recommended using supplemental oxygen immediately. Melissa said she wanted to conserve oxygen for higher altitude. Dorje explained that if her oxygen saturation was already critically low, conserving oxygen meant dying. Melissa told him that she had paid him to guide, not to lecture. At 9:30 a.m. on the 8th of July, Melissa was at approximately 7,500 meters on the bottleneck. Her movements were becoming uncoordinated. Her judgment was visibly compromised. Dorje was supporting her physically, essentially carrying her upward. A serac above them was making ominous creaking sounds. The ice was unstable. The conditions were worsening. Dorje made a command decision. He told Melissa they were descending immediately. Melissa refused. She said they were too close to the summit to turn back. She said she would not pay the remaining balance of her expedition fee if they descended without summiting. Dorje attempted to force her to descend. Melissa physically resisted. She was hysterical, screaming that she had come this far, that she had paid too much, that she would not turn back. Her brain, starved of oxygen at 7,500 meters, was no longer capable of rational thought. But her determination was absolute. She pushed Dorje away. She began climbing higher alone. Dorje attempted to follow her. He was moving faster, trying to catch her, trying to physically stop her, but the terrain was steep and exposed. At approximately 10:15 a.m., on a section of the bottleneck covered in mixed rock and ice, Melissa's foot slipped. She fell backward. She impacted the rock, face approximately 20 meters below her starting point. The impact injuries were severe. Dorje descended as fast as he could, reaching her in approximately 5 minutes. Melissa was unconscious. She was not breathing. Her skull had fractured. There was nothing Dorje could do. At 10:47 a.m. on the 8th of July 2023, at 7,300 meters on K2's bottleneck, Melissa Ramirez died. She had ignored her guide's warnings 4 times in the final 2 hours of her life. Dorje descended alone, traumatized. In interviews afterward, he said, "I told her we had to go down. She said she was paying for a summit. I told her the ice was unstable. She said I was being fearful. I told her oxygen was critical. She said I was trying to sabotage her. At some point, I realized I was trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. The mountain doesn't negotiate with egos."
It was July 8, 2020, at Camp 3 on K2 at 7,400 meters. Rachel Morgan, 41, a pharmaceutical executive from Boston, had paid $135,000 for this expedition. Her guide was Dorje Sherpa, 35, with 16 years of experience and 5 K2 summits. Rachel had told her company she would return in 9 days with a summit video. Rachel had told her followers she was unstoppable. These commitments were driving her decisions at altitude. Rachel had arrived at base camp on June 20th with a film crew. She was climbing Everest and K2 in the same season without supplemental oxygen, designed to generate content for her personal brand. Dorje had explained that combining 2 8,000ers without oxygen was extraordinarily dangerous. Rachel had responded that her body was stronger than most people's. Dorje had documented his concerns. Rachel had refused. By Camp 2, her acclimatization was poor. Her oxygen saturation was 61%, alarmingly low. Dorje recommended descending and attempting K2 the following year. Rachel said she had media commitments. Dorje documented his recommendation. Rachel refused. By Camp 3, she was coughing constantly, a sign of pulmonary edema, fluid building in her lungs. Dorje recognized the symptoms immediately. Without descent, it would become fatal within 24 hours. On July 8th, a brief weather window opened. Rachel insisted on summit that night. Dorje said she was too sick. Rachel said she felt fine, that the cough was just dry air irritation. Dorje said pulmonary edema was not an irritation, it was a medical emergency. Rachel said she was the only one who understood her body. Dorje said at 7,400 meters, all bodies responded the same way. They broke down. Rachel told him to prepare for summit, or she would file a complaint about his performance. They left Camp 3 at 10 p.m. on July 8th. Rachel was moving slowly. Her breathing was labored. With each step, she coughed. Wet, productive coughs, indicating fluid in her lungs. By 2 a.m. on July 9th, they were at 7,800 meters. Rachel's movements were becoming uncoordinated. Her speech was slurring. She was experiencing confusion. Her brain was being damaged by extreme altitude and severe hypoxia. Dorje told Rachel they were turning around immediately. He told her that if they continued, she would die. Rachel said she had promised her followers she would summit. Do you see the pattern? A guide begging, a client refusing, a mountain waiting. They climbed together through July 9th. Rachel's condition deteriorated with each 100 meters. By dawn, she was at 8,200 meters. Dorje checked her oxygen saturation, 38%. Critical. Dorje forced her to descend. Rachel was too weak to resist. She was compliant but confused, moving mechanically without awareness. They were descending through the Bottleneck, a narrow gully between 7,600 and 8,000 meters, where massive seracs hang above the route. Seracs become unstable as the sun warms them. Dorje knew this. He was moving fast, supporting Rachel's full weight as they descended. At 2:30 p.m. on July 9th, a serac above them fractured. The ice block fell directly above them. Dorje heard the sound and looked up. He saw the falling ice. He tried to pull Rachel out of the fall zone. He wasn't fast enough. The impact struck both of them. Dorje was hit across his left side and back, ribs fractured, left arm crushed. Rachel was struck on the head. She died immediately. Severe head trauma. Dorje remained unconscious with severe injuries for 4 hours. He died at 6:45 p.m. without ever regaining consciousness. Dorje's body was left on K2. Rachel's body was recovered by a separate expedition. The investigation concluded Rachel had pushed too high despite severe pulmonary edema. She had refused to descend despite clear medical warnings. And a guide with 16 years of experience died because he refused to abandon her. It was May 19, 2024. Everest Base Camp, 17,600 feet, temperature -6 degrees Fahrenheit. Prayer flags snapping hard in a wind that hadn't let up in 3 straight days. Tyler Brecht was 31 years old, a social media influencer from Miami, Florida, with 400,000 followers and a habit of turning every hardship into content. His flaw was simple and, in hindsight, fatal. He had faked altitude sickness twice already on previous expeditions, specifically to trigger dramatic helicopter rescues for his channel, and both times the stunt had worked perfectly. The first warning sign surfaced at base camp when the expedition doctor, a woman named Anissa Rahman, reviewed his medical history and found records of 2 prior insurance claims for emergency evacuations that didn't match his actual symptoms at the time. She flagged him privately as a liability risk and told the lead guide to monitor him closely from day 1. I need you to remember what I just told you, because it matters more than you think right now. This man had already lied twice before, and lies like that don't just disappear, they follow you up the mountain and wait. If you think you know how this ends, put your prediction in the comments right now before I tell you, because I promise most people get this one wrong. And hit subscribe if you want to see whether your gut instinct was right. The second warning sign came at Camp 2 when Tyler complained loudly of chest pain and demanded an immediate evacuation on camera, only for his oxygen saturation to read a healthy 89%, completely normal for that elevation. The guide, a New Zealander named Craig Ellison, refused the request outright and told him bluntly that fake emergencies wasted resources meant for people in genuine danger. The third warning sign happened at Camp 3, 23,500 feet, when Tyler again staged a coughing fit for his camera, describing textbook symptoms of high-altitude pulmonary edema to his followers in a breathless voiceover, while his actual vital signs stayed completely stable. Craig warned him directly this time. If he cried wolf one more time, the entire team would stop taking his complaints seriously, no matter what. The inciting incident began at 2:07 in the morning on May 23, during the summit push above the South Col, when Tyler's breathing turned genuinely labored, a wet crackling sound audible even over the howling wind. He radioed down describing real chest tightness and told his guide he couldn't continue. Craig, remembering 3 prior false alarms, told him flatly to keep moving and stop performing for the camera. This is the part of the story people can't stop talking about, and I think you'll understand why in about 90 seconds. What happens when the truth finally arrives wearing the same costume as every lie before it? Tell me honestly in the comments if you think you'd have believed him either, because I'm not sure I would have. And if this question sits with you the way it sat with me, subscribing means you won't miss what this channel digs up next. By 3:50 that morning, Tyler was coughing up pink, frothy fluid, an unmistakable sign of high-altitude pulmonary edema, but his own history had trained his team to doubt every word out of his mouth. Another climber finally noticed his lips had turned a dusky blue and insisted the symptoms looked different this time, urgently different. Craig radioed base camp for an emergency descent, but confirmation and coordination cost nearly 40 critical minutes because Dr. Rahman initially assumed it was simply another staged episode for the cameras. Tyler died at 5:33 that morning at 25,900 feet, his lungs filling with fluid faster than the descent could outpace it. His final words, according to a nearby climber, were a quiet apology for not being believed sooner. The subsequent investigation confirmed acute HAPE with no evidence of fabrication this time, and noted plainly that the delayed response was a direct consequence of his own manufactured history. His management team released a statement blaming the expedition company entirely. The company responded by releasing Dr. Rahman's medical logs, and the criticism stopped within a week. 2 climbers who demanded the mountain bend to them, and 2 guides who watched entitlement curdle into tragedy in real time. Everest doesn't care about your bank account or your follower count, and it never has. Not once, not for anyone. If you want to see what happens when the next climber ignores that same lesson, subscribe to Mountain Takes right now, because this mountain has plenty more stories left to tell, and I promise you won't see the next one coming.
It was May 22, 2024, at approximately 6:30 a.m. at Camp 4 on Mount Everest's south side. The altitude was 26,000 feet. The temperature was minus 40 degrees Celsius. A climber named Jennifer Blackwell, age 48, was preparing for her summit push. Jennifer was a successful pharmaceutical executive from New York. She had paid $92,000 for her Everest expedition through a premium operator. She had hired a private guide and a personal photographer. She had purchased every piece of equipment that existed. She had also purchased, in her mind, the right to do things her own way. Jennifer Blackwell had arrived at Everest Base Camp on the 10th of April, 2024, with specific expectations. She was an executive who made decisions affecting millions of dollars and thousands of employees. She was accustomed to people listening to her. She was accustomed to her opinions being treated as facts. She was accustomed to her will being the determining factor in outcomes. She had never encountered an environment where her will literally could not override the physics of altitude and oxygen. Her guide, a Sherpa named Pasang with 22 years of experience, had attempted to establish basic safety protocols from day one. Jennifer had rejected them. She wanted to climb faster than the acclimatization schedule allowed. She wanted to skip certain camps. She wanted to push harder and higher each day. Pasang had explained that the human body requires time to adjust to altitude. Jennifer had responded, "My body doesn't follow schedules. My body does what I tell it to do." By Camp 2, Jennifer's behavior had become problematic. She was pushing ahead of the group. She was ignoring rope protocols. She was attempting to climb sections of terrain that were beyond her technical skill level. Pasang had to constantly retrieve her from dangerous situations. He had documented multiple instances where Jennifer's decisions had created hazard for herself and other climbers. He had recommended she descend and attempt Everest in a future year when she would be better prepared. Jennifer had told him that his job was to follow her decisions, not to question them. At Camp 3, Jennifer experienced severe altitude sickness symptoms. Her oxygen saturation was 56%. She had a crushing headache. She was experiencing confusion and disorientation. Pasang recognized the signs of early cerebral edema. He strongly recommended immediate descent. He said her life was in danger. Jennifer said she had experienced worse hangovers, that she was fine, that they were continuing to the summit. Pasang documented his recommendation. Jennifer refused. On May 22, Jennifer and Pasang left Camp 4 for the summit push. Jennifer was moving slowly, moving poorly, moving dangerously. Her oxygen saturation was 51%. Her movements were uncoordinated. She was making poor decisions about rope placement and route selection. Pasang was essentially guiding a person whose brain was not functioning correctly, a person whose judgment had been destroyed by the altitude, while her confidence in that judgment remained completely intact. By 9:30 a.m., Jennifer was at approximately 27,200 feet. Her condition had deteriorated significantly. She was breathing heavily, even with supplemental oxygen. Her movements were becoming erratic. Pasang recommended stopping and descending immediately. Jennifer said they were almost to the summit, that she could feel it, that they were so close. She was hallucinating. The summit was still 1,800 meters above her. Her brain was so damaged by lack of oxygen that it was creating false perceptions of reality. At 10:15 a.m., Jennifer collapsed. Her body could no longer support her weight or her movement. Pasang attempted to support her, but she was dead weight. He called for assistance. Other guides responded. They attempted to administer supplemental oxygen and to lower her toward Camp 4. But Jennifer's brain was already too damaged. She had been at extreme altitude too long. Her lungs were filling with fluid. Her body was in complete system failure. At 12:47 p.m. on May 22, at approximately 27,600 feet, Jennifer Blackwell died. She had ignored warnings from her guide 11 times, according to Pasang's logbook. 11 times he had told her they needed to descend. 11 times she had overruled him. The 12th time, her body simply stopped responding. She died because she believed her will was stronger than the physics of altitude and oxygen. Pasang descended in silence. He did not work as a guide for the remainder of the 2024 season. In a statement to the expedition operator, he wrote, "I have guided for 22 years. I have guided people who were afraid, but who listened. I have guided people who were confident, but who respected the mountain. I have never guided someone who believed that being an executive made her immune to altitude. The mountain takes everyone equally. Money, experience, authority, none of it matters. The mountain only understands oxygen saturation and time at altitude. This woman understood neither." It was May 14, 2023, at approximately 6:45 a.m. at Camp 3 on Mount Annapurna's north face in Nepal. The altitude was 7,500 meters. The temperature was minus 35 degrees Celsius. A climber named Christine Aldridge, age 51, was preparing for her summit push. Christine was a social media influencer from Los Angeles with 612,000 Instagram followers. She had built her brand around wellness, fitness, and motivational content. She had posted repeatedly about her Annapurna attempt, telling her followers that she was going to summit and inspire millions. She had sponsored gear companies who had provided equipment in exchange for social media promotion. She had made commitments to her followers that she would summit. Christine had arrived at Annapurna Base Camp on the 20th of April 2023 with a photographer, a videographer, and a content team. Her expedition was not primarily about climbing the mountain. It was about documenting her climb for social media. Every camp was photographed. Every moment of struggle was filmed for authenticity. Every rest break was captioned with motivational quotes. Her guide, a Sherpa named Pemba, with 20 years of Annapurna experience, had attempted to establish basic safety protocols. Christine had rejected them. She said that authentic content required real struggle, real difficulty, real documentation. Safety protocols, in her view, would make the content look staged. By Camp 2, Christine's oxygen saturation was already compromised at 62%. Pemba had recommended she descend and attempt Annapurna in a future year. Christine had responded by filming his recommendation and then posting it to her Instagram stories with the caption, "Even my guide thinks I'm too strong for this mountain." Fitness no limits, Annapurna will not stone. Pemba had been horrified. He understood that her post was not just documenting her attempt, it was committing her publicly to continuing, regardless of safety. Turning back now would look like failure to her 612,000 followers. On May 14, Christine and Pemba began their summit push from Camp 3. Christine's oxygen saturation was 58%. Her breathing was labored. Her movements were slow. Pemba suggested using supplemental oxygen immediately. Christine said she wanted to earn her summit without oxygen. It would be more authentic for her followers. Pemba explained that authenticity meant nothing if she was dead. Christine filmed his explanation and posted it to Instagram with commentary about how guides try to limit us with fear. By 10 a.m. on May 14, Christine was at approximately 8,000 meters. Her oxygen saturation had dropped to 44%. Her brain was being destroyed by the altitude. Her judgment was completely compromised. She was hallucinating, seeing things that weren't there, hearing voices that didn't exist. Pemba was supporting her, essentially dragging her upward, because turning back now would mean admitting failure to her followers. Christine's desperation to summit was no longer about mountaineering. It was about maintaining her brand. At 11:30 a.m., Christine collapsed on the mountain at approximately 8,050 meters. Her body could no longer function. Her oxygen saturation was 38%. Her brain was swelling from cerebral edema. Her lungs were filling with fluid from pulmonary edema. Pemba attempted to administer supplemental oxygen and to lower her toward Camp 3. But Christine's weight, combined with her complete incapacity and the exposed terrain, made descent nearly impossible for one person. Pemba called for assistance via radio. Other guides and climbers nearby responded. A rescue effort began, but at 8,000 meters in deteriorating weather conditions, rescue is almost impossible. By 2 p.m. on May 14, Christine's breathing had stopped. Her heart had stopped. Her body had simply failed under the impossible conditions of extreme altitude, combined with severe hypoxia and cerebral edema. At 2:47 p.m. on May 14, 2023, at 8,050 meters on Mount Annapurna's north face, Christine Aldridge died. Pemba descended alone. He did not work as a guide for the remainder of 2023. In a statement to the expedition operator, he wrote, "I told her 5 times we needed to descend. She said her followers were watching. I told her oxygen was critical. She said she wanted to earn her summit. I told her she would die. She said that was authentic. The mountain does not care about authenticity or followers. It only cares about oxygen saturation. When oxygen fails, everything else fails with it." Christine's Instagram account remained active after her death. Her followers posted thousands of comments, some mourning her, some claiming she had died doing what she loved, some using her death as content for their own posts. Her final Instagram story, posted at 11:47 a.m. on May 14, showed her at high altitude with the caption, "The mountain is trying to stop me, but I'm stronger than fear. Nothing can stop." The post was made approximately 17 minutes before she lost consciousness.
Yeah.